All right. I guess we'll get this thing going. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy New Year. Glad to see you all here at the Good City Think and Drink. We have some big news. So as of hopefully February, we will have an in-person option if things work out. I'm meeting with folks at Seven Seas, and hopefully we'll be able to utilize their back room to have this in for the February meeting. We'll get things straightened out and get that information out to everybody to see if that all pans out. But it would be great to see people. We will also hopefully be seeing if we can record these so that if you can't make it or you don't feel comfortable coming to that, you can always watch those afterwards. If we can do it in real time as well, I will figure that out, but I'm not sure if that's possible. We'll see how it goes. But we'll be chatting about that a little bit more as we know more about that. My name is Jim Gell. I should introduce myself. My name is Jim Gell. I'm a professor at the University of Washington, Tacoma, and the host of the Good City Think and Drink. Welcome to the, I believe, 5th or 6th year that I've lost it at this point, that we've been doing this, and we're looking forward to an exciting group of talks this year. We still have some spots open the second half of this year, so if you have other ideas, please keep sending those to me and I will try to set those up. Our next talk, so it's the second Tuesday of every month. If you're not familiar, if you haven't been here before, so our next talk is on February 14th, Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, has nothing to do with Valentine's Day, or maybe fortunately, depending on whether you're somebody who celebrates or not. We'll be talking about student cheating. Is it really cheating? Understanding the new relationship students have with information and the truth by Andrew Erickson here at UW Tacoma. So I hope you'll chime in for that one. And then in March, we have my boss, the Dean of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences, who's going to be talking about repulsive Renaissance poetry. So stay tuned for March as well. It's going to be good this year. So all kinds of great talks coming up. So again, a quick rundown on this. I will introduce our speaker. She will give you an amazing talk. And then we will have a break. We'll give away some prizes through some random factoids that yours truly has looked up that are only marginally connected to Alex's talk. And then we will have a question and answer session. So I hope you'll stay around for that. I'm going to stop sharing. So without further ado, I will introduce our speaker. Dr. Alex Nutter is a teaching professor of media studies at UW Tacoma and the vice chair of culture, arts, and communications here at the university. Administrative responsibilities during the COVID era have severely limited her ability to do research. I believe she may not be alone, but she remembers it fondly and hopes to resume her investigation of feminized labor in the influencer industry and her ongoing, if one-sided feud with pseudoscience enthusiast Gwyneth Paltrow in the near future, which I look forward to. So without further ado, Alex, it is all yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Let me get my screen share situation organized. You'd think I would be able to do this so quickly by now. Jim and I already looked at this and I can't figure out how to turn the closed captioning off. I think that's from PowerPoint. So hopefully it's not too much of a distraction. I did notice earlier that it was making some pretty funny miscalculations, misreads. So perhaps that'll be amusing at least. So thank you for logging in and having me in your living room or your kitchen or your office or wherever you are. It feels kind of personal, but I'm going to miss the crowd noise, I guess, that comes along with being at the Swiss. And I also just realized, excuse me, that the last time I did this, I was pregnant. So I was not able to engage in the drinking part. So I'm having a cider during my talk to make up for that. Nevertheless, I'm here to talk about some of the messaging that perpetuates this omnipresent and sometimes it feels like relentless pressure many of us feel around two nebulous but definitely connected concepts of wellness and self-care. I don't think that there's any sort of agreed upon definition for either one of these terms, but I'm going to start by at least asking you to think of wellness as a destination. It's a state of being that is actually by necessity unreachable. So the horizon keeps moving. And I say by necessity because the journey to wellness is, and I mean, actually has been for a very long time, tied to consumerism. So if it were a reachable state, the consumption of products and services tied to wellness would in all likelihood stop or at least be drastically curtailed, right? Which is something that normatively we do not want in capitalism. I'm going to explore self-care a bit more over the next couple of slides, but it might be useful to think of self-care as a process, or maybe as a journey to some destination or state of being. And perhaps that is actually the unreachable state of wellness. But for some groups, both now and in historical sense, the destination of self-care, like the objective, was different. It was like religious or spiritual enlightenment, or achieving like a quasi-harmonious relationship with nature, or achieving social and political equity. But I would like to argue that most often in neoliberal, consumer-focused America, the objective of self-care is to maintain a body that is physically and mentally and emotionally healthy, not necessarily because those things have inherent worth, but because a body that is disciplined, that is constantly being observed, is a source of labor that is able to contribute to the continuity of the capitalist economic order. So there's a double role there, right? For inhabitants of laboring bodies in a neoliberal society, as consumers, we're spending money on the things that we need, the goods and services that we need, or associate with achieving wellness or self-care behaviors. And then as workers, we're using that attained functionality to keep the economy going with our labor. I'm going to apologize for the quality of this video. It's like 45 years old and it's like clearly been through some shit in terms of like format changes, but this is all that I had available, or the only one I could find. There's also a couple of like choppy transitions in here. So we're going to watch about 2 minutes and then stop and then about another 2 minutes. But this is Dan Rather in a 60-minute segment in 1979, talking about what is apparently to him a brand new phenomenon, specifically called wellness.
There's a word you don't hear every day. It means exactly what you might think it means, the opposite of illness. It's a movement that is catching on all over the country among doctors, nurses, and others concerned with medical care. Wellness is really the ultimate in something called self-care, in which patients what one doctor calls recognizing that health is not simply the absence of disease. Oh, is Teresa Rose. She's a former nurse who turned to self-care after suffering for years with painful muscle inflammation. Unable to find a cure with regular doctors and specialists, Teresa gave up traditional medicine and entered a program of self-care known as wellness. This is a new and developing concept that takes self-care to its farthest point. Noted for his work in this field, Dr. John Travis established a wellness program soon after finishing medical studies at Tufts and Johns Hopkins universities. Can you give me a definition of wellness?
It's recognizing that there's more to life than the absence of sickness. The health is simply not the absence of disease. It's an ongoing dynamic state of growth. Just because you aren't sick, you don't have any symptoms, and you could go get a checkup and get a clean bill of health, doesn't mean that you're well. It doesn't mean that you're going to prevent disease further down the line.
I had been in and out of the Cleveland Clinic. I had seen numerous specialists in various areas, and I just was so tired and so fed up being in so much pain that I would give you a ballpark figure of about $35,000 over the last 9 years in medical care.
Traditional medical care.
Yes, and had achieved nothing.
152, 3.
Giulio Esposti joined self-care for the same reasons. He's an executive with a major West Coast firm. For years, he suffered from constant headaches and physical pain. Doctors told him it was due to stress in his work. But any test or x-ray doctors administered to Giulio proved negative. Like Teresa, Giulio says he didn't find relief until he entered a program called Wellness. Now, is what you're into a substitute?
Okay. I enjoy the extremely stiff way that Dan Rather says phrases like what you're into and entered a program of self-care called Wellness. It's like he's never heard those words before. And when Dr. John Travis uses phrases like ongoing dynamic state of growth or saying a clean bill of health doesn't mean that you're well, it really emphasizes the point that I made about wellness being an unreachable state of being. So in that 2 minutes, 2 individuals were introduced. The first one, Jane, suffers from muscle inflammation. And if you can hear a child screaming in the living room, I swear there's someone out there with him. He's not just being like running amok out there. So sorry if that's a distraction. Anyway, Jane suffers from muscle inflammation and like an unspecified, pain, right? And so she turned to self-care. But there's a long-standing and very well-documented medical bias against treating women's self-reported pain. So she's pressed to find an individual solution to a systemic problem in the medical industry. Julio suffers from stress headaches as a result of his unspecified, high-powered executive job. So he turns to self-care for stress and pain management. And so here we see a worker, again, someone who needs to maintain that disciplined, functional body to contribute their labor, right, to the economy, driven to find an individual solution to a pervasive cultural problem, specifically overwork and pressure in the corporate workplace, the valorization of long hours and unrealistic levels of productivity. And that, this was 45 years ago, but unfortunately, that's still the norm for a lot of workers. So 2 sort of cultural roadblocks that these individuals have decided to address by going around, right, rather than us looking for some sort of collective mitigation. Okay, one more clip.
Revived interest in self-care is reaching the health profession. Twice a year now, health professionals, surgeons, nurses, therapists, and others meet with Dr. Travis to learn methods of wellness, which they can use for themselves as well as for their patients. Great. So, the wellness group particularly, they said, well, what would you expect in Marion County, California? It's another one of those two. Okay, that's what the critics say to me. Yes.
Well, I don't like labels, especially with all the latest publicity on cults in the San Francisco area. And I think that wellness as a concept doesn't need to have a culture or subculture added to it.
A doctor from Southern California, I'm talking about a physician, he's very critical of the wellness movement, said, Mr. Rather, what you're dealing with is a middle-class cult.
That's anti the whole concept of wellness, to follow blindly. We are not cheap, and the whole thing we're learning here is to take responsibility for ourselves, to question, and to use what fits for me.
And in wellness, you are the leader. You're your own guru, and you're the perfect person that is trying to make your life better and more full.
If more and more people become involved in wellness and indeed do take care of them.
That was an awkward stop. Not my fault. Okay, so Dan Rather here tells us that the reaction from the mainstream medical establishment is basically dismissive. And then he sort of pivots and brings in what was in context a relatively hot topic of the time, specifically like the discussion of cults or cult-like behavior. As an aside, I think it's interesting to note that some of the practices associated with wellness programs in the 70s and 80s are like heartily embraced by mainstream doctors or HMOs or insurers, and especially by corporate employers, which I'll get back to in a few minutes. But I just want to dwell for a second on a couple of the things that were said just at the end there. specifically quotes like, "We take responsibility for ourselves, and you're the perfect person that is trying to make your own life better and more full," and also something about being your own guru. So what we see, what we're hearing in those statements is a very, very neoliberal sentiment coming from a left-associated group. So specifically the belief that individuals must assume responsibility for any challenges or setbacks they face, rather than expecting any sort of assistance from a social safety net, is very much a neoliberal ideological commitment. And so perhaps you can see how that idea feeds into cultural stories that are still prevalent today about meritocracy and bootstrapping, which is why this connection, or the appearance of such sentiments being expressed by an apparently liberal group, feels sort of incongruous, but it actually persists today in several different ways. But just the awkward way that Dan Rather speaks about wellness and self-care in this segment really marks those things as subjects that were largely unknown to mainstream audiences at the time, and as something that is sort of like a novelty or a curiosity. And you may have noticed, despite the grainy footage, a general whiteness of faces. Also, the unspecified doctor that Dan Rather quoted referred to self-care as a middle-class cult prevalent in especially Southern California. So we get ample hints about how the wellness discourse was racialized and classed, which does bring to mind a particular lineage of fringy, we'll say, behavior carried on almost exclusively by white people from the turn of the 20th century, but actually, back into the 19th century as well, among smaller groups of, again, largely white folks who withdrew from the mainstream. So I want to stress that what I'm about to offer is like a super simplified, it's not even an overview, it's just sort of two stops on the continuum of like utopian commune slash health sanitarium history. I maybe could have mentioned or should have mentioned like early transcendental or Protestant communes, or like the egalitarian socialist communes. Some notable examples of which were located right here in the Puget Sound region, and which were also overwhelmingly white. But to get back to what I did choose to talk about to sort of illustrate this kind of fringy history, I have two specific examples. So this gentleman is the cereal baron and yogurt enema enthusiast, Dr. John Kellogg, and his Battle Creek Health Sanitarium in Michigan, where turn of the previous century, rich white folks would come for treatment for, a whole host of diseases, both identified and just sort of, general malaise, which they presumably paid handsomely for. Unfortunately, they also received probably a rigorous education in eugenics, as Kellogg was the founder of the Race Betterment Program, the purpose of which is probably sufficiently explained by its title. This facility, by the way, sorry, that's cat noise. This facility, by the way, is or was dramatized in the T.C. Boyle novel, The Road to Wellville, and then the movie of the same name. And this is really neither here nor there, but a fun fact for you to consider over your next bowl of cereal is that Kellogg was also stridently anti-masturbation. And in fact, cornflakes were first served at Battle Creek because their bland taste and texture was intended to calm abnormal excitement. He was also an early vocal supporter of like universal circumcision for that same reason. So super fun guy. And then although the hippie communes of the 60s and 70s mostly left eugenics, and sex negativity behind, they did maintain a focus on natural, clean living. And then despite being intentional communities, based on the idea of like cooperative learning, they leaned really heavily into the DIY ethos that we heard expressed toward the end of the 60 Minutes clip, right? So, focusing on personal responsibility, becoming your own guru, not trusting institutions, and so on. But the occasionally inscrutable, I guess, behavior of some privileged white people is only part of the history of the concept of self-care. Unfortunately, it's one that has, made it into our modern, I guess, mainstream awareness. But it's really important also to bring into the conversation the fact that the Black Panthers stressed self-care as a set of behaviors meant to protect the health and safety and bodily autonomy of Black people. So Angela Davis in particular, when she was released from prison in 1972, started to promote this agenda, sounds wrong, but that's the word that comes to mind, promoting radical self-care in Black communities, saying self-care has to be incorporated into all of our efforts. This is something new. This is something I have learned from younger generations. I had to learn from younger people that it's as important to take care of yourself and to do this within a collective context. So yes, this means exercising the body. This means finding a place for spiritual expression. This holistic approach to organizing is, I think, what will eventually move us along the trajectory that will move us to some victories. Very different rhetorically, right? So rather than focusing on like an individual ethos, right? The idea of individuality and sort of, striking out on your own, it retains the idea of being potentially distrustful of institutions, right? And taking matters into your own hands. But there's a focus on collective good here, right? I mentioned self-defense training also was a big part of her radical self-care agenda. Not that self-defense training is radical, but I just wanted to make sure I put in there that was an element of the Black Panther self-care agenda that was maybe not present in some of the other more white examples that I talked about. And then 15 years or so later, the feminist and civil rights activist Audre Lorde addressed radical self-care again in her book, Burning to Live, Bursts, no, I don't remember what it was called. Bursts of Light, sorry, I knew I had it written down somewhere. So Audre Lorde said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. So in both of these articulations, self-care takes on a political significance, explicitly so, right? The objective being to cultivate and maintain strength and vitality among a harshly and often violently marginalized group of people. Both Davis and Lorde recognized that their well-being was not a priority for their oppressors. And taking up that responsibility for themselves, but for themselves in service of their community, was in many ways a strategic maneuver intended to, as Davis said, move them forward on the trajectory to achieving some victories. And so this radical lineage where self-care is a path to realizing political victory and actualizing a more equitable society has often been overlooked by many people who claim to be invested in self-care and wellness in the modern era, including, I had to at least mention her, famed pseudoscience pusher, Gwyneth Paltrow, also the purveyor of moon juice, Amanda Chantal Bacon, or this is a new one on my list, any one of the many white celebrities who are cashing in on the newly legal cannabis market to make money selling CBD or CBG products with no acknowledgement of the racist history of cannabis criminalization and research. And of course, Gwyneth, Amanda, and Travis are not wholly or even primarily responsible for the depoliticization and commodification of wellness. And it's not even accurate to say that this is just driven by celebrities in the United States. It would be accurate here to mention, or it would be maybe helpful to mention, many wellness influencers on various social media platforms also fall into this category, sort of promoting a whitewashed, decontextualized vision of wellness. But the problematic nature of the influence and attention-based economy labor market is, sorry, hang on, someone's yelling at me. Okay, I think it'll be okay. I apologize. Just the problematic nature of that labor market, which is just exploitation all the way down, makes me hesitate to point to anyone specifically who isn't comfortably at celebrity level. So there is a widespread promotion, especially among people with high profiles, of a type of wellness that is, again, totally whitewashed, gentrified, makes no acknowledgement of either the problematic histories that it incorporates or of the places that it borrows from. On the other hand, a cultural awareness seems to be growing, and I will say especially among young millennials and Gen Z, of the way that people of color have been erased from the wellness and self-care narrative, for example. So you can see in the article from Teen Vogue, right, a very long and detailed account of the connection between self-care, radical self-care, and the Black Panther movement. Also a growing awareness of how the movement, insofar as you can call wellness a monolithic movement, awareness of how it's been commodified. And then even an awareness of the problematic origin of some of the aspects of self-care, meaning the neoliberal and predominantly white schools of thought, I guess. I know it's really difficult to read that small caption, between the New Yorker image. So here it is. Self-care is newer in the American lexicon than self-reliance, but both stem from the puritanical values of self-improvement and self-examination. And I think that's a really interesting point, because self-care is often sold to us as, a pleasurable activity meant to sort of, refill our energy stocks. But really, it is connected in a very significant way to the idea of self-reliance and self-discipline, and both are definitely connected to an underlying ethos of self-monitoring, of surveillance, and disciplining the body into being a productive unit of labor. So, aside from the popular press, we've recently seen the publication of several popular books on the subject, like Ronald Purser's McMindfulness, Barbara Ehrenreich's Natural Causes, and The Wellness Syndrome by Kjellstrom and Spicer. My point is, right, by showing this collection, is that it would be inaccurate for me to say that we are in a place culturally where no one has recognized the existence of whitewashing in the wellness industry, or where people fail to comprehend the problems that come along with the commodification of self-care products and services, or, where nobody recognizes the ubiquity of pressuring self-care narratives as a way to maximize or extract the most energy from the working or laboring body. So these voices do exist. And to focus on that last point for a few minutes, I'd like to take a brief look at the function of workplace wellness programs, about which there is a ton to say, and I had to prune a lot down. So hopefully there's still continuity in the slides I'm about to go through. Okay, workplace wellness programs. 92% of employers say that they have some form of workplace wellness, but the definition of what constitutes such a program is really, really vague. But the more involved programs generally include financial incentives for participation. And some of these might appear pretty innocuous, like maybe your employer, specifically speaking to my colleagues in the audience here, maybe your employer is one that has a financial incentive driven workplace wellness program. So there are a lot of resources on offer on the Whole You webpage, and many of them are not directly tied to any sort of monetary compensation. But if you were to click on the discounts tab on the Whole You page, you can see that there are 238 wellness related discounts. And they do include things like massages and chiropractic and like nutrition coaching. But overwhelmingly, the services on offer are gym memberships or class discounts at like Pilates or yoga or bar studios, and then active recreation opportunities. And so if that doesn't necessarily seem to you like a financial reward, at least it is recognizably an incentive or a subsidy to participate in very particular exercise related activities, right? So there's an equation of health and exercise there. On the other hand, or like, I don't know, maybe just a little bit further down the continuum, we can find other programs that are, I don't know, I'd say troubling, maybe, to say the least. One really offensive example, which is why I'm singling it out specifically, is a program for Whole Foods employees. I don't think they call it this anymore, but the snappy name was Whole Foods Team Member Healthy Discount Incentive Program. There's not even an acronym there. I don't know. Anyway, they used a range of health metrics that were evaluated in this program. And then by meeting various criteria, employees can earn a greater discount when they shop in the store. Sorry, cat issues. So the problem with this is that the metrics are largely associated with weight, even like as explicitly as having a BMI under 24 as an indicator of health, meaning that you get a larger discount. So when employees go up to the register to use their discounts, like on a purchase, the percentage they save comes up to whoever is ringing them up, and it's correlated with like a narrowly defined and ill-defined indicator of their health. Another common program, just non-specific but common, is or are activity challenges, usually connected to some sort of wearable device, wherein meeting some sort of goal, like perhaps the sort of commonly accepted 10,000 daily step threshold, meeting that may result in, I mean, generally it's like a reduction in your insurance premium. And so the problem here isn't necessarily like the activity or exercise itself, but rather the fact that employees are then required, in order to participate, are then required to do work outside of working hours, because most of us are not walking 5 miles in the course of a normal work day, right? So an employer who monitors levels of activity in this way is now able to keep tabs on, essentially, to observe and to manipulate an employee's behavior outside of work. And furthermore, I mean, some people just don't have the time, resources, right? Or, the ability to meet the requirements of an activity challenge. And I won't even mention, I thought about talking about, but I won't even mention things like healthy eating challenges, success in which is often measured by weight loss, whether individually or collectively, except to say that they still do exist somehow. So businesses frame wellness programs, as opportunities for self-care, and as a category of benefits being offered, right, to employees. It's not, I don't think it's not exactly a secret to say that workplace wellness programs are also meant to increase productivity among workers. However, if employees were really concerned about maintaining health to maintain productivity, it would be logical for them to support public, universally available healthcare, but almost entirely, large corporations do not support that. So why? I am far from a labor historian, but kind of one sketched out point, I guess, is that employer-sponsored health insurance, healthcare, is considered a hallmark of a good job, of a successful job, right? So being able to offer insurance to prospective employees is it's a ace, right? It's like a big selling point. And employer-sponsored or employer-provided health insurance only really took off after World War II. And health insurance for employees was generally included in collective bargaining agreements and then eventually became tax subsidized. So today we are accustomed to that being the model. And today still health insurance, or the provision of health insurance, is a huge bargaining chip that prospective employers would lose if high quality healthcare was more widely available. So it's a recruiting tool that they would lose. And from there, you can kind of circle back to workplace wellness programs, because something like 40% of payroll expenditures, I think it might be a little higher, of payroll expenditures are on healthcare benefits. So on a macro level, incentive exists for employers to keep those costs down by lessening the probability that employees will actually need to make use of those benefits. Hence, a culture of not just monitoring, but self-surveillance and competition designed to maintain bodily health. Okay, this is not a smooth transition. So you're looking at a space where I cut some stuff out, and I think it hurts continuity, but I really wanted to get this in as kind of a last example. I haven't discussed the general appification of wellness, but I want to almost close out by taking a look at this promotional spot for BetterHelp. And this allows me to focus really specifically and briefly on mental health as wellness. So if you're unfamiliar, BetterHelp is one of two major apps that connects users directly with a therapist. Talkspace is the other one. There are more, but those are the two main ones. And speaking of labor issues, they've created some really problematic labor concerns, like a whole new class of, unstable, uncertain, precarious workers, because it's essentially a gig app for therapists. But that's maybe for a different discussion of the morality of gig labor. But back to my point. Let's watch this BetterHelp ad from 2021.
What do you want? Wow. I want a job that I could be proud of. And I want my parents to stop calling me for tech help. And I want to fall in love. Yeah, I do. Sometimes I feel like I just want someone to tell me exactly what to do. I want to be more confident and less scared. Sometimes I feel like I'm on an island and everyone else is in these rowboats with their full lives rowing somewhere, and I don't have a boat. I'm just stuck, forgotten.
I mean, what do you want to eat?
Oh, just the pad thai.
So the chicken satay, the mango salad, and 2 orders of the pad thai. Yep, that's everything.
Okay, so the things this guy wants are not unreasonable goals. They're modest even. So my argument is certainly not that we shouldn't seek a fulfilling job or to fall in love or more confidence and less of a sense of fear or just a sense of dedication and purpose. These aren't new struggles, right? But our understanding of how to achieve success in these categories has certainly changed, along with the breadth of our view of the world. For example, when he describes being stuck while everyone else is rowing away, that sort of malaise has been pondered in popular culture for decades at least. But our worlds have become much larger in the social media era. So watching some long forgotten acquaintance, you know, progress through their life on Instagram, or, you know, scrolling through TikToks that document the successes of people half your age, just as a random, for example, it accentuates that stuck feeling, right? And the stage of life that we now call emerging adulthood gives people more time to find the perfect partner, or find their soulmate. And dating apps have created a wealth of choice and opportunity. So what constitutes success? Like, the goalposts are constantly moving there, right? So it's obviously overwhelming, but technological advancement is inevitable, and it inevitably, changes culture. So dealing with these ongoing problems is an inevitable part of existing in a society, right? Not to say, again, not to minimize these as issues, but you know, collective sort of, I guess, growing pains along with technological development. But for me, probably the most concerning part of this commercial, or the part that I tend to focus on, is the last 10 seconds or so when the punchline is revealed. And so we see someone who's presumably a friend or a roommate just sort of breezing past the soul-bearing litany he's just heard from his friend, and like redirecting his attention to ordering dinner. And then we see the tagline, "Need someone else to talk to." And so here it's crucial, I think, to point out the significance of gender, especially that these two characters are men. Close male friendships have historically been, and still are, largely socially fraught phenomenon. We're unfazed by women having like intimate best friend and confidant relationships. And much research indicates that such relationships are major contributors to, I mean, emotional health, emotional stability and well-being, you know, even to other areas as well, right? Even to physical health. So we're fine with women having these relationships. It's normal. It's part of our popular culture. But when those connections are masculine, we exhibit like a level of discomfort that, you know, is even necessitated the creation of like a sort of silly, I think, portmanteau, right? Like bromance. So we can't even call it, you know, a close friendship or an intimate, emotionally intimate friendship. So we deflect attention from like the mental and spiritual benefits of such relationships, even though increasingly we recognize the benefits of those relationships. So rather than take on that sort of ingrained social set of assumptions, BetterHelp here is offering a commodity that you can, as you can with all commodities, pay money for, in order to allow you kind of a workaround, right? To sort of use the same metaphor that I brought up at the beginning when we talked about Jane and Julio. Sorry, my son is screaming again. I'm not laughing at that. It's just, I hope you can't hear. Okay. No.
What do you want?
I already did that. Okay, so just to kind of wrap it up, I mentioned earlier, way earlier, that I saw a sense of incongruity between like the bootstrap sentiment, like as in, you know, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, and you know, that being expressed by the interviewees in the 60-minute segment. And I just wanted to reconnect with that thought for a second and to highlight kind of another stop that I made briefly on the way when I showed a headline arguing, or a sub-headline arguing, that wellness is a type of self-surveillance underscored by puritanical ethics. So the neoliberal commitment to individual responsibility and productivity overall isn't just economic. It's connected to a set of moral assumptions that equate, I mean, among other things, equate health with morality. So the rationale goes that if you were engaging in correct behavior, you wouldn't be sick or unwell. And therefore, if you are unable to provide a laboring body, a functional body, you're an immoral person. You failed, right? So it's similar to the way that we consciously or unconsciously connect fatness with immorality, right? So as much as we might point to the science or health as its objective overall worth, it's important to always keep in mind that our ethical frameworks are never ever separate from, the assumptions that we make or what we're socialized to believe in neoliberal society. And that's it. Thank you.
A virtual round of applause for our speaker today. Thank you, Alex. That was amazing, really interesting stuff. We want to give Alex a quick break, and then we'll come back to our question and answer in just a second. It's always tough to follow up the talk with giving away prizes when it's a more serious topic, but we're going to try to do this. So this is our, to show it because I have to get close because of my thing. This is some of the last pairs of Grit City Think and Drink socks. So you can do what, you can lounge around in these, you can do whatever you want in these. And we have a couple pairs left to give away. And as I said before, the speaker has nothing to do with my idea of related topics when it comes to factoids to give away these socks. We have 2 pairs to give away. And my first is actually related to something Alex said because she stole my other question in some of her talk. So the question is, who played Kellogg in the 1994 Road to Wellville movie? Text your answer. First answer, correct answer gets the pair of socks. Text your answer. Who played Kellogg in the Road to Wellville? And the speaker cannot win the socks. Sorry, I'll send you a pair. Anybody? Oh, Matthew Broderick, no, but he was in the movie. He played a big role, was one of the main characters. Nice job, Jeremy. You would never maybe think of this person in this movie, but he was. Everybody's now Googling who was in Road to Wellville. Anybody? Jeremy at least got somebody in the movie. Anybody got other ideas? Oh, I think we're gonna have to give it to Jeremy because he at least got Randy. That's okay, Randy. What do you got?
Shouldn't one of the many media scholars be here?
Is not Kellogg. He was in the movie, but he was not playing Kellogg. All right. I think in this case, we will give it to Jeremy Davis because he was the first one to name somebody in the movie at least, but Anthony Hopkins actually played Kellogg in the movie, which is kind of amazing. Oh, Natalie gets it. Maybe we'll assume she was still typing. I don't know, Alex, we'll have to figure out whether I have to give it to my boss or give it to my sub boss. All right. Anyway, so good. So that was maybe harder than I thought it was going to be. You guys all need to go find that movie somewhere on one of your streaming things and watch it now because it's a little bit weird because they talk about the texture of your poop as one way to tell how healthy you are. The second question I have, and this is going to be a visual. Let's see if I can get my visual up. All right. So first one to name this pose. She did have yoga in the title, so I went with it. Whose pose is that? Let's see if I can find my stuff. Anybody? But maybe that's the less common name for it. Alex?
I mean, you're on Bakasana. I feel like I remember that. We had to learn the Sanskrit words in yoga teacher training like 20 years ago. So
this is what happens when I Google things. They don't give me the Sanskrit name for this. Anybody? No yoga aficionados? Wow. I was gonna say, I think I once tried to do this pose. Unsuccessfully. Frog is not it.
Sometimes it helps if you're drinking to do this because your fear is minimized a little bit. So
I think that's downward frog. There's a good guess one, but that's not it. But great idea. Broken wrists. I can't remember. I know it. Crow. Randy gets it.
There it is.
Crow pose. Thank you very much, Randy. So Randy and Jeremy. Jeremy gets one sock Randy actually gets both. So I will get those to you since I know where you live, and I will stop sharing the crow pose so that we can get to our question and answer. So if you have questions for our speaker today, please chat those in there, and I will start one off for Alex. Alex, can you, so one of the things, so we see like these wellness programs as supposedly what you have to offer as an employer, right? There's like, that seems to be the thing, like if you're going to hire employees, you have to have one of these programs. But I'm curious what you think about the medical industry offering kind of a similar idea, right? So I can't remember if it's multi-care or something along those lines. Like they have a points program where if you do some like list of things that are healthy, whatever it is, you actually get, there's some incentive. I can't remember if it's discount on your health insurance or it's something along those lines. So I was wondering if you could comment on something like that.
So actually, I thought a lot about that, or I have been thinking a lot about that recently, because I'm not actually sure like which direction the math goes in, I guess, because Kaiser does that as well, right? Like they offer different like wellness programs and like milestones that you can meet. And I think even probably most of us have signed like the tobacco attestation, right? Where you get like a discount on your insurance. And I mean, my instinct always is to sort of figure out why it's related to money. And so, I mean, in an industrial sense, it's becoming increasingly hard, especially for like HMOs, to serve the amount of customers that they have, right? So to be able to maintain a large client base, while still kind of minimizing like the amount of actual one-on-one care that they have and encouraging patients to treat themselves, that's sort of my my guess on that. But yeah, I don't have any empirical data to support it.
Yeah, I always wonder, it's interesting because I do wonder if it's a cost-cutting method, right, to some extent, or is it just to get you thinking more about potential services that you might be getting, right, that you aren't getting right now. So I always wonder whether that's really about helping you be more healthy or somewhat of a commodification from another industry.
Yeah, it could be promotional, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I think to keep you paying premiums without actually having to make use of services is probably, or your employer paying premiums.
Yeah. And I think that's a pretty amazing thing that you brought up from our own employer, that you're really like product placing your wellness type of thing by giving discounts to particular places. That's different, I think, from what I've seen from the healthcare industry, where it's like, if you do these actions, like, you know, you get something from this, but it's not about, hey, you should go do yoga at this place or Pilates at this place or anything along those lines. So it's interesting to see that from employers, because it is somewhat like they won't let us, in most cases, our employers won't give you the name of a lawyer or a therapist to go see, because that would be like plugging them, but it's okay to give a coupon to something like this in this case, which I think is really different.
Yeah, I was surprised to see chiropractor on there, although I mean, like the, I guess, scientific solid footing of chiropractic medicine is debatable. I'm going to say that as carefully as I can. So I was surprised to see that on there, but yeah, it's primarily just gym memberships and discount passes to like Pure Barre. So how they choose those businesses, I don't know. But there are a lot of things that I would rather have a more drastic discount on. Like they give a pretty shit discount on childcare, for example. I'd sure rather have that than that be subsidized than a gym membership.
I worry about when we start to see a discount on tights or something along those lines.
Lululemon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. So from Dan, from Leanne, what do you see as an antidote to the commodification of wellness? How might folks who care deeply about emerging adults, like maybe college professors, encourage their development and well-being without inadvertently amplifying ineffective and problematic industries?
Excellent question. So, I mean, I think that question is fundamentally, it's like, how do we combat commodification across the board, right? When we're so like set in a consumer society, that's the way that we solve our problems, even if we don't realize that we're doing it, right? So a lot of things that you might direct, like well-intentionally direct students toward, could also be part of that economy, right? That the money exchange economy. So I think that trying to find resources that don't actually require like the expenditure of money, things that the university offers perhaps are good. But I think also there's a lot of just sort of personal things that many of us do or could do more of, just, you know, like checking in to see if everyone is okay, having conversations that might be uncomfortable or difficult, like inviting students to feel that you're a source of potential assistance. That's a lot of like personal heavy lifting, right? It's emotional work. And I mean, we all know that a lot of the emotional labor of our jobs is shouldered, or it's disproportionately shouldered by women and people of color. But finding ways to offer support that is, again, it's, you know, one-on-one human connection. Commiseration isn't the word I'm looking for, but like real empathy. I think that that's a way to step outside of the commodity circuit.
Cool. Thank you. Good answer. I mean, very thoughtful answer. So Pam asks, how do we disaggregate the theoretically good kinds of self-care, i.e. don't let yourself be exploited, from the bad kind designed to make you more efficient worker? Put differently, has your research discovered differences in the messaging that serves capitalism versus the messaging that resists capitalism, even if it is often still neoliberal?
That was more than one question, I think, Pam. But
that is a typical exploit of faculty members.
Yeah. So I think that the separation of like identifying what is good and useful and what isn't is actually in some ways personal, right? There are things that like it's a situation. This is a situation where like if someone were to ask me, how do we decide what like environmental behaviors are good and which ones are just sort of like corporate posturing, I kind of want to say like, well, you should do those things, right? Like still, you know, ride your bike and use reusable bags, like even if we know that those aren't necessarily, you know, that those are sort of corporate suggestions. So with regard to self-care, it's a similar situation, right? Like if something does offer you a measure of comfort and relaxation, I would hate to tell anyone not to do that, right? Because like we're all just trying to get by and survive. And that's totally reasonable. So separating, like, I mean, I don't know if it's fruitful to try to find like positives in capitalism and negatives. I think just like being aware of the way that certain messages are not just constructed, but like where they're shared. One thing that just came to mind is I was at Target the other day and there was an end cap with like facial products, and it just said like, I think, get that self-care across the top. And I mean, that's such a transparent, you know, capitalist appeal. So in a way, I think just being able to recognize that, right, and to sort of call it out and maybe bring that into the awareness of people around you is helpful. But like, again, I just would never want to imply or would want to judge anyone for doing things that help them cope, right? Because the problem isn't necessarily individual people and their struggle to like, you know, survive and be happy. It's where all of that comes from. Pam, I don't know, like there were a bunch of questions in there and I think I maybe sidestepped all of them.
I'm sure that you can follow up with her
yeah.
at some point. I'm going to end it with this one because we're out of time. But Natalie asks, do you know if there have been any legal cases against employers related to wellness incentives?
I do, and I am not a legal scholar. I'm sure that you all know that, but yeah, so there have been, and like nothing is coming to mind immediately, but I do know that a lot of, so we tend to think of HIPAA as like medical privacy, but HIPAA also has a lot to do with like how you can offer these programs, what you can offer employees like by way of reward, but then also how you have to offer exceptions. And so employers predictably will run afoul or just run right over the stipulations. One case that I can't remember the name, so I'm just going to seem like I'm making shit up, but one case that I read about quite a bit was just a new mom whose BMI was like rated as being obese, right? She just gave birth. And so her employer mandated that she have personal training sessions once a week until her BMI became again, like healthy. And so, I mean, rightfully, she sued the shit out of them. And I believe won. And so again, that seems like I just pulled it out of nowhere because I don't remember the actual name of the case, but it is things like that, right? Where there are supposed to be exceptions. The issue, of course, is that a lot of people don't know the law, right? So workers don't know what their rights are. So you can't sue your employer or anyone unless you know what your rights are. And I think that corporations probably take advantage of that quite a bit.
Thank you. This has been a great talk and a great conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Happy New Year to everybody. We hope to see you on Valentine's Day to uncelebrate Valentine's Day and do anything else on Valentine's Day, but give into the corporate greed that is that. So I hope that you'll be here to learn about what students think of cheating. But thank you, Alex, for a wonderful talk. And
thank you, everybody.
I hope that everything with your cat and your son is well in the other room. So everybody take care. We didn't hear any of that, but for your own expression, it's something.
I know that's what Cindy said, but I was so nervous. It's so loud.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Thank you so much, Jim.
Bye, everybody.